Hi everyone, Christina here. Welcome to another card video at my YouTube channel and blog. Today I'm going to be using some brand new products from Simon Says Stamp. These happen to be products that I designed for their Stamptember release, and I've been eagerly awaiting to use this background because it's based on one of my cards that I created here on YouTube not too long ago. So you'll remember that card. I'll have a link to it up in the top corner if you want to check that out. But I loved that triangle design so much that I really wanted to see it used as a background design, a background stamp design. So that's what I'm going to do today and do a similar watercoloring look on top. So I first prepped some Strathmore watercolor paper with an EK Success powder tool. Well, this is an anti-static powder tool, and it's going to help the embossing powder stick to only areas where I've stamped that design. I coated the background stamp in Versamark ink and then pressed that watercolor paper down onto the background stamp. I put a piece of paper over the top just to protect it while I rub my hand over the top and make sure that every single area of that watercolor paper comes into contact with the background stamp below. After I lifted that off, I took some white embossing powder from Hero Arts and sprinkled that over the top. There were a few little areas that still had some embossing powder in the center of the triangles, so I used a dry paintbrush to sweep those away. I then took my heat tool and heat set the embossing powder until it was melted and smooth. And then I'm going to do some watercoloring. So I'm going to use some Distress inks. These are the mini ink pads. I'm using 5 different colors. The first color is Scattered Straw. I'll then use Worn Lipstick, Seedless Preserves, Faded Jeans, and Evergreen Bough. And I wanted these colors to really mix and blend with each other. So I'm smushing them down onto a craft sheet, and then I'll go ahead and spray it with a ton of water, not a large amount of water, but enough to get the inks kind of beating up on the surface of this craft sheet. This is a very similar technique to what I showed in last Tuesday's video, where I used markers instead of Distress inks. I used markers and drew them onto the craft sheet and then sprayed it with water until I got water droplets, and then smushed my watercolor paper down onto the craft sheet. It's a very, very similar technique. You can do this with a bunch of different inks and different markers. Anything that's kind of like a water reactive medium, you can do this with. So I wanted to sop up some of those areas where that are really puddling up. So I just used the corner of a paper towel to sop up some of that moisture. And this is going to help the watercolor area from not being oversaturated and starting to muddy up the colors too much. So I'm going to hit this with my heat tool until it's completely dry. And then I decided to pounce this watercolor piece back into those water droplets just to get some additional color in some of the areas. So I did this a couple of times just to get some more colors kind of mixing and melding into those already blended areas. And after this third time pouncing down, I realized that I was getting some sort of muddy gray areas, and I didn't want those. So I immediately went in with my paper towel and dabbed up some of that color. I wanted to make sure that I wasn't losing any of the really pretty colors underneath. So I hit it with my heat tool once again, and then I cleaned up my craft sheet. I want this completely clean before I move on to the next step. I'm going to take those mini ink pads and smush them down onto the craft sheet once again. And this time I'm going to be picking up color with a paintbrush and just painting on some triangles on that design. Starting out with that Evergreen Bough, and this color is actually quite concentrated at the moment. As I go on with my painting, you'll notice that I water down the colors much, much more. But I did want to show you that this initial triangle painted with Worn Lipstick, it was very, very intense. And then I watered down that color a little bit more, painted a couple smaller triangles, and I realized that the color was more diluted and I liked that more. So then I brought in some water onto that darker triangle. This is just clean water. And I put that over that dark area and then used a paper towel to pick up some of that color. And it just took away that intensity, and that's more of what I wanted. So I'm going to speed up the video process here because this took a little bit of time. And I'm just going to show you how I painted in a bunch of the colors over the top. I really wanted to, have some more intense yellows over the yellow area and some more seedless preserves over the purple. I really just wanted to mix the colors a little bit more. So you'll notice I've brought some of that purple into the blue area and I'm bringing the purple down into the green area. I really wanted to get those colors to sort of look like they were all over that entire piece. I didn't bring too much yellow down into the purple, however, because purple and yellow are complementary colors, and when they mix together, they make gray or brown, and I didn't want to do that, so I didn't bring any of the yellow down into the purple area. Adding on a little bit more color just to see what it looks like. And this is almost done. Once it was completely done, I used my heat tool to go ahead and dry everything and make sure it was bone dry before moving on to the next step. So like another video that I've done this week from Thursday's video, I'm going to die cut a window in the lower right corner of this card here. I'm going to be using the Sari circle die, and I found another circle that's just slightly larger than that. This is from the Simon Says Stamp Nested Circles die set, and I'm die cutting a circle window out of the front of this card, or it will be a card. Right now it's just a watercolor panel. I'm going to do some more die cutting. I'm taking that circle that I just cut out and I picked one that's slightly larger. I'm going to cut out a vellum piece. This vellum is going to cover up that circle window, and I don't want to have to do 2 layers of cardstock, like the watercolor paper and the cardstock on the front of the card. So I thought I would die cut a vellum circle that looks nice and cut, and then I won't have to put an extra panel on the inside of the card. So then I cut 2 pieces, or 2 Sari circle dies out of some Neenah Solar White cardstock. This is the 80-pound version. And I cut 2 of those, and you'll see why here in a minute. Using my Tim Holtz craft pick just to get that die cut out of the die. And then I'm going to work on the card base. I've cut some Neenah Solar White cardstock. This is the 110-pound version, and I've cut it to be 4 3/4 wide by 5.5 tall, and then I scored it just a 1/2 inch from the edge. This is going to give me a nice flap so that I can adhere the 2 pieces together and create a card. I added some Tombow Extreme adhesive onto that flap, and then I'll use my grid mat to line up this piece here and then put my watercolor piece over on the side, overlapping that flap. And it's not going to be a perfect cut because you have to even it up after the fact. So I'm going to go ahead and use my paper trimmer and just cut off the tiniest amount off of the free edges to make sure that everything lines up perfectly. So now I'm going to adhere that vellum circle on the inside of the card, just using some Ranger Multimedia Matte for that. And you'll notice I've got a little bit of watercolor splatter on the inside of the card. I'm not too concerned about that. It's such a small amount, and it just shows that it's a handmade card, so I'm not too concerned. If you were concerned about that, you could most definitely cover that whole entire panel on the inside with another piece of cardstock. I used an acrylic block to hold that down while it dried. And then I'm going to prep those 2 Sari circle die cuts. And I'm just pressing that die cut down into a vellum, or not, no, I'm sorry, not vellum, onto a Versamark ink pad. And then I'm going to sprinkle on some embossing powder from Simon Says Stamp. This happens to be the ultra fine antique gold embossing powder. And I'm going to hold the die cut with some tweezers while I sprinkle on the embossing powder. The area that is being held by the tweezers won't get any embossing powder, but I'm not worried about that because I'm going to do a second layer of embossing powder. And when I do that, I will change where the tweezers are holding the die cut. And so then that area that previously had no embossing powder, it will get some on this time round. So I'm pressing that down into the Versamark pad once again, picking that up with my tweezers, and then I'll just dip that into the embossing powder that's left in this coffee filter. For embossing powders that I don't use quite as often, I will use just a coffee filter as sort of a backdrop to catch all of that embossing powder, and then I can easily funnel that back into the jar of embossing powder. And it's also really great because then you can bring that die cut back down into the embossing powder in the coffee filter if you need to, like I did today. If you have any areas that aren't smoothed out, you can go ahead and heat that once more and it will soften all those edges. So I did the exact same thing on the other Sari Circle die cut, except this time I did it on the back side of the die cut. And that's because I'm going to be adhering these two die cuts onto that vellum circle, one on the outside of the card and one on the inside of the card. It's going to hide any of that adhesive or the back side of that Sari Circle die cut when you look at the inside of the card. I stacked up 3 acrylic blocks to hold that die cut down onto the vellum while it dried. And then I went ahead and adhered the back side of that die cut on the inside of the card. So I'm lining that up. And then I'm going to go ahead and use the acrylic blocks once again to hold the die cut down while it dries. And that will pretty much finish up the card for today. Wanted to let you guys know that this card video and blog post are part of a blog hop celebrating Simon Says Stamptember. And if you want to win or want to have a chance at winning an amazing giveaway prize, make sure you head over to my blog for more details. They have a huge prize pack that they're giving away for the entire month of Stamptember, so you'll want to go and check that out. Thanks so much for watching today's video. I will see you guys on Monday for another card video. Until then, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.